Hello and welcome to the Global Journalism Seminar Series at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford. I'm Mira Salva, Deputy Director of the Institute and Director of the Journalist Fellowship Programme. This seminar this week feels particularly pertinent. We're speaking about media freedom in Belarus with Volha Siakhovich, a Belarusian legal expert, human rights campaigner and writer who specializes in media and freedom of expression issues. Since 2013, she has collaborated with the Belarusian Association of Journalists, an NGO whose mission it is to defend freedom of expression and protect the rights of journalists in the country. This is an incredibly important and complex topic, and I'm particularly glad to have a lawyer, as Belarus has really pushed international law to its limits at the moment. Last month, the Belarusian journalist Roman Prasovich was arrested in Minsk after a Ryanair flight to Lithuania was diverted. In a tearful appearance on state TV shortly afterwards, he praised President Alexander Lukashenko and admitted attempting to topple him. And this week, he appeared alongside military officials at a press conference about the flight diversion. Several journalists and diplomats, including the BBC's Jonah Fisher, believed he was there under duress and left. And it's not just about Roman. Today, the Committee to Protect Journalists awarded one of its 4 International Press Freedom Awards to Katsiariana Berisevich, a staff correspondent for the influential Belarusian news outlet Tut.by. In 2020, she was reporting on pro-democracy protests in the country and published a story about a protester allegedly killed by law enforcement. This contradicted authorities' official statements, and as a result, she spent 6 months behind bars and still faces crippling fines. In the span of just 3 months in 2020, Belarusian and foreign journalists were arrested more than 310 times in the line of duty. And as of April 2021, 12 journalists remain behind bars. Volha, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. As our colleague Caitlin said yesterday, now it is dramatically good time for this seminar. Belarus, black hole for media freedom. This was from the joint statement of 5 UN independent human rights experts made on 7th June in relation with the media situation in Belarus after the hijacking of a passenger plane. They said Belarus entered in the black hole, media freedom in Belarus entered in the black hole with no end in sight. Reporters Without Borders placed Belarus at the 158th position among of 180 countries. Belarus in last year has been the most dangerous country for media personnel. I would like to say some words about a unique situation in media landscape of Belarus. Belarus is sometimes called the reservation of socialism, and there is evidence of this in its media sphere. Denationalization and privatization of the media have not yet taken place in the country. The Soviet-style system of propaganda has been preserved, which is designed to spread state ideology. It is the job of the Ministry of Information, whose sweeping powers include the authority to shut down media outlets, to ensure that few alternatives to the state propaganda can be heard. The media sphere in Belarus can be divided into 2 sectors: state-run and independent. Outlets in the independent camp are either privately owned or funded from abroad. The ones state-run sector is funded from state budgets. The two sectors has given rise to two unions representing media workers, the pro-governmental Belarusian Union of Journalists and the Belarusian Association of Journalists, BAJ, which looks after the interests of journalists working for independent media. BAJ is the organization I work for. All Belarus-based TV channels and are state-controlled. The only TV channel that can offers an alternative point of view is the Belarusian language satellite channel Belsat, which is based in Poland. In state-run media outlets are funded from the state budget and are generously resourced. However, this does not necessarily translate into a bigger audience. Online, where private media could operate relatively freely, they have achieved a significantly greater reach than their government counterparts. This has been boosted by the steady growth of internet access in Belarus, about 80% of the population in 2020. And by the process of generation change. We have now reached a point where the internet generation has replaced the TV generation. In 2019, most Belarusians usually used the internet to receive news, according to the results of an opinion poll. Websites and social networks were the main sources of information about the situation in the country and in the world for more than 70% of Belarusian population. The 2020 presidential election campaign has clearly demonstrated the extent to which Belarusians have lost faith in Lukashenko and are ready for change. This year, media freedom has deteriorated dramatically as the authorities launched a violent crackdown in a bid to discourage journalists from reporting on election-related protests. In 2020, there were about 500 arrests of journalists. About 100 of journalists were sentenced to short jail terms from 3 days to 15 days. More than 50 news websites was blocked at the decision of the authorities. Many journalists, hundreds of journalists were sentenced to fines for covering protests that officially named unsanctioned events, mass unsanctioned events. For 3 days after the election, internet access in Belarus was severely disrupted. At times, the blackout was total. At other times, specific services, websites, social networks, and messaging services were blocked. Access to a number of media websites, including my organization, BAJ websites, was blocked for users in Belarus as a result of targeted government actions, despite the lack of any official decisions. It was a day without internet. Almost every summer and autumn weekend, since the day of the election, mobile operators in Belarus stopped providing mobile internet services to users at the request of authorized state bodies. Because on weekends, usually protest actions, demonstrations took place. The Ministry of Information ruled to block access from Belarus to more than 80 websites, including some influential news websites. And I would like to pay attention that on 18th May 2021, the most popular online outlet to buy, mentioned by Mira, was shut down. I will speak about this later. After the election, while covering protests, 62 journalists, both male and female, reported that they were subjected to violence, including some cases of torture. In Minsk, there were at least 3 cases of police using firearms against journalists, having resulted in injuries. You can see on the photo a moment when a security forces officer is shooting at journalist Natalia Lubnyevskaya. She was injured in a leg and spent several months in hospital. But now she's working. Later in February, my organization BASH was also subjected to repression. BASH has been continually monitoring the situation and with media freedom and providing assistance to the affected journalists, particularly after the election. On 16th February 2020, the police searched apartments of BASH deputy chairs, Oleg Ayev and Boris Goretsky, and 6 more BASH members in different cities in the investigation of a criminal case for organizing and preparing activity that grossly violate public order or active participating in them. The BASH office was searched as well, and equipment was seized. Having been searched, BASH office was closed by the police for almost a month. Is it information war? The authorities now speak about information war against the state. In official discourse, there is a constant reference to the information war against the state by media and through media. The answer to this is a war on the truth. Every day we meet new challenges. Our independent media community. On 2nd April 2021, the first day of the Belarusian parliament session, a package of draconian laws was adopted, including to the law on mass media, which consolidated the emergency measures already applied in practice in relation to protest manifestations of any kind, officially called extremist activities. Extremist activities are too broad definition in our legislation. As he presented the bill, Belarusian Information Minister Ivarotsky said the information being spread through the internet does not always contribute to the development of the society and the state. Internet has become a tool of information wars aimed at destroying societal foundations and moral values at the times of entire countries. The most acute challenge for us now is criminal prosecution of journalists and their imprisonment. There are 22 journalists and media workers being under criminal charges, and 3 journalists have been convicted. There are 27 journalists are being behind bars right now. 17 of them are women journalists. What is a Belarusian jail? Belarus is a country where pretrial detention conditions are inhuman, degrading, and discriminatory against women. In contravention of the UN stated minimum rules on the treatment of prisoners, prison personnel in Belarus are usually men. Guarding women prisoners as well. I would like to refer to the words of respected lawyer, member of the Opposition Coordination Council, Lilia Vlasova, who got out of jail in October 2020 to stay under house arrest, about the condition of detention. In a small room, there are 10 iron bunk beds, a toilet, and a washstand with cold water. There was no daylight. In addition to bars, the windows are covered with iron blinds that do not let daylight and obstruct air access. Waking up is at 6 a.m. From this time to 10 p.m. it is forbidden to lie. You can walk and sit on the bed. I think you all know about the case, prominent case of Roman Protasevich. He is social media activist. On the left, you can see a tweet with reaction of the UN Commissioner, Office of the UN Commissioner on Human Rights. Protasevich is the former editor-in-chief of Next, a media operation with a Telegram channel and visibility on Twitter and YouTube. The channel played a key role with the most popular channel after the election for Belarusian citizens during the election, and it has continued to do so as in its aftermath, particularly with the government imposing internet blackouts. Protasevich now works, before his arrest, for a different opposition Telegram channel, Belamova, after its former editor, Igor Losik, was arrested by the Belarusian authorities in June 2020. Protasevich has been living in exile in Poland and Lithuania since 2019 because of concerns for his safety due to the fact that the authorities alleged he was involved in making the documentary Lukashenko Criminal Materials, published on the YouTube channel Next. In November 2020, Protasevich was charged of organizing group actions that grossly violate public order, as well inciting hatred, inciting enmity on the basis of professional affiliation, particularly in relation to government agents and law enforcement officers, via Telegram channels that he created and managed. As well, after that, he was put on the international wanted list, and the State Security Committee, KGB, put him on the list of organizations and individuals involved in terrorist activities. It has been the first media activist put in this list. Many people asked me why Lukashenko hijacked a plane for arrest of an editor of a Telegram channel. I don't know why, but his role in covering protests after the elections, and some people think in not only in supporting protests are significant. Protasevich is not the first and not a single media worker arrested in Belarus. Mentioned above, Katerina Borysevich was released in May after 6-month imprisonment for disclosure of confidential medical information causing grave consequences. Her publication on the influential online outlet Tutbai has exposed an official coverage of killing of peaceful protester Roman Bondarenko. This young man was severely beaten by masked individuals, driven to the police station in an unmarked van, and then died in hospital. You can see a photo of Katerina Borysevich in court, and on the right, this is protest slogan in support of Katerina when she was in jail. Flowers instead of imprisonment. Free Katerina Borysevich. Two Belsat TV journalists, Katerina Andreeva and Daria Chultsova, are serving 2-year prison sentence for alleged organizing actions that grossly violate public order over live broadcasting of the violent dispersal of peaceful protesters, paying tribute to Roman Bondarenko in the neighborhood where he had resided. These girls in the court in Belarus, they must be behind bars in the courtroom. On the right, there is a picture. There is a billboard on the building of Polish embassy in Brussels in support of journalists, our journalists. And this is about recent event. A few days ago, Tony Lloyd, member of parliament and chair of the all-party parliamentary group on Belarus in the British parliament, adopted the Belarus political prisoner Daria Chultsova. What? This is she. British support to our prisoners. On 18th May 2021, the authorities launched an unprecedented crackdown against the most popular news website, Tutbai. to Dubai with daily with amount of daily visitors up to 20 million, is the country's main independent media, and had extensively covered the demonstrations and the violent crackdown by the authorities. The Belarusian Financial Investigation Department opened a criminal case against Dubai staff members over large-scale tax evasion. The same day, the Ministry of Information has blocked Dubai website and its mirrors. It was total blocking, not only from Belarus, but from anywhere. 13 to Dubai and related company staff members are being arbitrarily detained, and they are being in prison now. In the conditions similar to those I told earlier. Despite this, Belarusian independent journalists feel support of the Belarusian society, foreign colleagues, and international community. There are examples of solidarity with journalists. There is a graffiti in one of the neighborhoods in Minsk, Heroes. A man with the word press on his clothes. And on the right, there is a light projection on one of the buildings in Minsk with the words, Losik, don't give up. Igor Losik was an editor of a Telegram channel, and at that time he was on a hunger strike for about 30 days. Solidarity with Dubai, recent event. On the left, there is a picture of Belarusian painter Volha Siakhovich. Dubai, long live Dubai. She never paint people, just cats and dogs. And on the right, solidarity action in support of Dubai. We to Dubai. And what about current results of these actions of the authorities? I think that our brave media community, independent media community, continue to do what the media must to do for society, to provide relevant information on the developments. Block news websites work through so-called mirrors, Telegram channel, and social networks. Print newspapers prohibited from printing in Belarus are published online. Journalists report on in the extremely difficult conditions being supported by the society. During the recent press conference with participation of Roman Protasevich, one of independent journalists, Tatiana Karavenkova, working for a news agency Belapan, answering Protasevich's question, journalist, are you trusting me? Answered, no, we are not trusting you. Please stay safe. We support you. It was very brave. "2020 is the year of Telegram. The role of Telegram has increased dramatically. By the beginning of August 2020, there was 4 channels in Belarusian Telegram segment that had more than 100,000 subscribers. Today, there are about 20 of them. You can see the results of public opinion poll conducted by Chatham House. They were released in February 2021, answering the question, to what extent do you trust or distrust the institution listed below? Most Belarusians placed independent media at the first position, and the dominant Orthodox Church is only on the second position. And state-run media at the end of the list. And just the Central Election Commission elected Lukashenko as president is below. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Volha, for that excellent presentation, and for in particular highlighting the kind of bravery of the journalists and also the importance of solidarity amongst the international community. I think this is very important to remember when journalists speak about what they need from each other when they work under pressure. Statements of support are so important, and so thank you for highlighting that. I want to ask you some questions, and if anybody in the audience has had some questions, please type them into the Q&A box. The first thing I want to ask you is to speak a bit more about what are the charges that journalists are arrested on. So when they're arrested, what laws are they accused of breaking?
Mm-hmm. There are 2 kinds of arrests. So-called administrative arrests, when journalists are sentenced to short jail terms, and in these cases, the charges are participation in an unsanctioned mass event. It means protest action or demonstration, or disobeying the police. If journalist was beaten, then he is guilty of disobeying the police. And sometimes it could be misconduct. And as for the second kind of arrests under criminal charges, then there are different articles apply, or the criminal code applies. Tax evasion, for example, or inciting hatred, or organizing of unsanctioned events. If somebody reports on unsanctioned demonstrations.
Thank you. What do you think needs to change in Belarus for journalists to feel safe? Everything.
Maybe we need to change the authorities. But of course, the legislation must be changed because our legislation, our media legislation is maybe the worst in Europe.
That's the difference in the law.
But in the current situation, the legislation is not so important. The authorities do what they want. Belarusian human rights defendants think we have our laws defaulted on. There is a legal default in Belarus. The law does not protect anybody besides law enforcement officers and state officials.
So I think this answers the question that's come from Rachel Chitra in India about in India, the government does not sometimes even bother to file charges against arrested journalists. So the person is under arrest, but the authorities have not come up with a reason for an arrest. Does that ever happen in Belarus? They're just detained without charge.
Yes. In Belarus, the authorities at first arrest and then change which charges they can brought against somebody. There is police abuse in Belarus.
Okay, thank you. And a question from Jacob Krupa, who's a Polish journalist on our fellowship program, who wants to ask about the support of Poland and the Baltic countries and other countries, especially with Belsat that you mentioned being supported by Poland, and Nexta is based in Warsaw. Do you think any of this has any real impact on the ground for journalists in Belarus? And what do you think these governments of these countries and other European countries should do to support journalism?
I would like to thank the European governments and other governments supporting media freedom in Belarus. We feel this support, and I hope our authorities also feel this support in another way. I think any information about the situation in Belarus can impact, because decision makers must know about what is occurring in Belarus. Yes, I think that European governments have done too much for supporting our journalists and the media, and not only the governments, but journalistic organizations, the European Federation of Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists. But the European Federation of Journalists does very much for us. We are constantly in touch with them.
Thank you. And the Belarus Association of Journalists is under great pressure, and this is a question from Renata Schroeder from the EFJ. You've been very, very strong with the work you've done. Have you ever been tempted to leave the country? I mean, where are you getting your strength from?
Are you interested in my position or
Yours.
my personal position? I'm just an individual. I think it could be the circumstances, I will be forced to leave the country. But I hope that these circumstances will avoid me.
Thank you. I really hope. I really.
I would like to say that our organization is officially registered and by the state authorities, and we are working now officially, and we have an opportunity to work.
Okay.
There is not so bad environments.
It's still not easy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You made some very, very interesting points about the internet, about the fact that the government minister for information has said that it is not good for progress and for, it can destroy countries. And Belarus has been very active in shutting down the internet after the elections. Mm-hmm. You also talk about Telegram being a very important channel for information. Are there other channels that you think are also important?
Also, there are social networks also important.
Which ones in particular?
And in Belarus, Russian language networks are most popular, and Facebook as well. And I would like to add that Belarusians, for a few days after the elections, learned how to use VPN and other instruments allowing to avoid the official blocking. For 3 days after the election, during the blackout, the reach of VPN Psiphon was more than in Iran.
Really?
Really. For 3 days after the election.
That's incredible. You talked about a generational change, partly because of the internet. Do you believe the younger generation have different values and will support independent journalism more?
The young generation had more access to internet, and the internet is the sphere of where the independent media have more influence. That's why the generation change is important. But today, different generations, not only young generation, support independent media because they are sources of truth, and the situation in Belarus is so that the truth can't be hidden.
And let me ask you a question about international law and Roman's situation in particular. What law can be used? What kind of diplomatic laws or laws about protection of refugees and can be used, do you think, to kind of help him?
He's a citizen of Belarus, and As I know, at the moment, there is no actions of international bodies in this relation. He is not a refugee. He has been living in Lithuania and Poland for several years. He is Belarusian citizen, but his girlfriend, Sofia Sapega, arrested together with him and charged as well under criminal articles, is a Russian citizen, and we hope maybe Russian authorities will help her.
That's the next question, which is, which countries do you think can apply any diplomatic pressure in this situation? Do you think it could be Russia or Poland or anybody?
Our president's relations with Poland are too bad. The only ally of Belarus in this situation is Russia, and almost the only is Russia. And yes, maybe Russia can do something if it wants, but but I do not know Russian president thinks differ than question.
Thank you.
About Poland. One of journalists imprisoned, Andrzej Poczobut, is Polish, and he was arrested together with activists of Polish society in Belarus, and now he is being in jail. He is COVID-19 patient, but he is in a cell, not in hospital, and he was charged of inciting hatred, and he is in a cell without relevant medical assistance right now. Today, my organization prepared a number of statements to the state bodies in support of him, to provide him access to medical assistance.
The next question is from Paddy Coulter. Bodies like yourself are doing really important work in drawing attention to the journalists and calling for assistance. What more do you think international organizations should do, especially ones like Article 19, Reporters Without Borders, Index on Censorship, who already speak out about media harassment in Belarus? What else can they do to support press freedom here?
These organizations do very much to support us. They are our partners and our friends, and in this situation, they gather information about media freedom violations and disseminate this information and appeal to their governments, to the international organizations. I would like to thank them for their support, particularly the Reporters Without Borders filed a complaint to the Lithuanian prosecutor over the hijacking of plane where Protasevich was. This is it has been a prominent action, and I hope it will have some impacts.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a very kind of concrete action demanding answer.
Very concrete action and very quick action in a few days after the event.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You are working as a lawyer and you're supporting journalists, and I would like to ask a little bit about what it's like for the journalists in Belarus, how they are coping with the pressures of their environment. They must be struggling. And do you see that it's still a job that young people with ambition and talent want to do? Is it still an attractive profession to go into?
Profession of journalist?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I do not know what young people think about profession of journalists, but working journalists who worked since the election in last August are the retired. They're retired. They exhausted because this is a state of constant unsafety. If you work in the field at the streets, but at the same time, so many journalists, so many staff members of Tudbai, editors, lawyers, accountants, who do not do something at the streets, they also were affected. But the attitude of the rest who are working now, for example, of news agency Belapan, is not too afraid and work. Not too afraid and work.
Don't be afraid. Do other artists, writers, authors, playwrights, do they have the same issues of suppression and arrest and the problems of freedom of expression? How widespread is it?
Yes, yes. The atmosphere is not free for any decent voices, for any decent manifestations. For artists, for musicians, and for theaters, they all people, all artists who supported protesters after the election are subjected to repression. In one form or in another, they could be they could lose their work if they work for state institution, or they could be arrested and sentenced to a short prison term, or their concerts or exhibitions can be prohibited by the authorities. Yes.
Thank you. And my last question on this is, what is the public reaction to these prohibitions? So when a journalist arrested or a theatre play is closed by the authorities, do you believe the public understand what's happening, or do they tend to support the government actions?
Yes, yes. The public understand that the authorities want to hide the truth. The authorities want to discourage journalists from reporting on important events. I do not know how it works, but the society in Belarus now can understand the situation with media and can differ disinformation from the truth. That's why Tudbai's Telegram channel in a few weeks has become at the second position among Belarusian segment Telegram channels. People do not want to read news in state-run media. They try to find relevant information.
Thank you. And I think that's where I would make that my last question, because that's the last hopeful note, that this is where change will come from the technologies that allow people to get information out, and from the fact that there is a demand for this information and a dialogue between the journalists and the readers that it's very hard to stop in a digital age. Volha, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. The issue of media freedom is something that we need to be very conscious everywhere in the world. In London yesterday, we saw a mob really attacking a BBC journalist to the point where he had to duck behind police lines to take cover for safety. And in the US, we saw awful scenes of insurrection. And next week here at the Global Journalism Seminar, we'll have Robert Moore from the ITN. Robert Moore, who's the DC correspondent for ITV News, was the only journalist from Capitol Hill who was inside the rotunda when the protesters breached the Capitol buildings on January the 6th this year. We'll be speaking to him about how he calibrated the risks, how he decided whether it was appropriate to broadcast interviews with white supremacists in the heat of the moment, and what it was like being in the middle of an angry crowd, in the middle of a pandemic, in the country with the First Amendment. Volha, in the meantime, thank you so much for reminding us of the work done by your organization and that done by Belarusian journalists. And we wish you all the best of luck and all the strength in the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest and for your support.
Absolutely.